What you waiting for? It's time. Time for love. It's time. Time for the sun and sand. It's time. Time for fun. It's time. It's time. It's time to let your hair down. Come on. Come on. Come on. To have no fear. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. It's time. What you waiting for? It's time. 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 What you waiting for?
Okay, it is that time again. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of the Merv Britto Show. It is that time again, and we are lovely to have you here. This is what, the third, fourth episode?
Fourth episode.
Is it the fourth episode?
Yes, it is.
So slowly but surely, we're populating the website. The website's up and running. Very basic, but it's a work in progress. It's a, what is it called? This thing of love, a labor of love, and then all good things come to those who wait.
That's true. That's true. Very true.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here in Goa with friends of mine, Andrew Gardner, Wilbert Cardozo, and I've got a special surprise. Somebody else is in the studio with us today, the one and only Mrs. Joanne Britto, who is in the studio with us because she's very excited, as are we all. We've got a special guest, and seems to be a lot of family and interesting people in our family that we want to highlight and speak to, and they've been kind enough to join us. So all the way from the borough, we will have the one and only Mr. Andrew Gardner. In a couple of minutes, he'll be on the show.
Yay.
It's a tough time for everybody. A lot of us love the dear Pope Francis, who's just recently passed away. And we thought this is a great time to speak to Andrew. Andrew's got a lot of experience. He's traveled to the Vatican numerous times. His background, his wife, his marriage was blessed by, I want to say the Pope. Was it the Pope? It was the Pope. Was blessed by the Pope. So it's a good time. We want to talk about that great man, and we want to talk about Andrew and get his insights about what he thinks has happened, is happening, and will happen. The right person to speak to in a few minutes. As always, you want to get in touch with us, you're more than welcome to. Give us a call. You can get it. There's a number. The number's going to come up. You can call us on a couple of these. Go on, Joy, announce them.
So you can connect with us on Facebook, on X, on Instagram, on WhatsApp, YouTube as well. And we're going to get on Spotify, Apple Music, and Amazon Music very soon as an audio format.
So currently as a test format, as a test project where we've got content on the website, but you can go and check us out on YouTube. And I think Instagram and Facebook are up and running, right?
That's right, yeah.
And after a certain number of views, and when we get the website properly done, you will be able to stream the show on the website itself. And we'll let you know when that's happening. In the meantime, we are gathering content with all of these interesting people. Ajoy, can you tell me, excusez-moi, the cost of mangoes? We're in mango season here in Goa.
The question is, where are the mangoes first? Because I think the season hasn't been too great. So the cost of mangoes, I think nothing less than 3,000 to 4,000 rupees.
Somebody told you, shut up. You didn't guess that properly.
I'm kidding you.
3,000 rupees a dozen right now.
Easy.
Driving home from Mopsa just now.
Yeah.
And as much as I like the hot weather, this is getting unbearable. There was a guy sitting on the road with a couple of baskets of mangoes, and I just stopped out of curiosity to ask him. $3,000 a dozen.
I wouldn't be surprised. And actually, the question is, are you getting organically ripened mangoes or not? Because apparently all of these mangoes in the market today are artificially ripened.
Yeah.
Through artificial, illegal means. So you might as well not have those mangoes.
Well, at $3,000, I'm not going to have them. Anyway, let's get back to the show. Willie, how are you doing? How's it going?
All good. About the mangoes, the other day the government actually seized a lot of mangoes and other ripe fruits because of chemicals, and they threw it all in a pit in Mapsa.
Shut up.
Yeah.
They seized them?
Yes.
Some vendors in the market?
Yeah, in the yard.
Oh, my God. What a waste.
Yeah, correct.
Because they were chemically ripened or whatever.
Yes, correct.
Oh my. Well, it's one of my favorite times of the year. I love mangoes, and hopefully the price will come down. They always taste so much better from the neighbor's tree, don't they?
Yes, they do.
Okay, let's get back to this lovely show that we're doing here, ladies and gentlemen. If you want to get in touch with us, you can message us or call us on WhatsApp, 7507-246-246. Apple Music, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon, Facebook, X, Instagram, and the good old-fashioned WhatsApp. We will send you a link. You click the link. You can come live on the air. You can speak to us. You can ask us questions, or just tell us what's on your mind. You don't have to be going. As I've always said, if you've got a connection to Goa, if you've traveled to Goa, you know somebody who lives in Goa, we'd love to hear from you. What's next?
So, since we are talking about the Pope's legacy, we have created a small montage with regards to the Pope. So we'll play that out and then we get into the discussion about his legacy.
The one and only Pope Francis. Let's go.
When Jorge Mario Bergoglio became Pope Francis in 2013, he broke centuries of tradition. The first Jesuit, the first Pope from Latin America, and the first to take the name Francis. From the start, he signaled a different kind of papacy, one grounded in humility, simplicity, and a call to serve the marginalized. He rejected luxury, chose modest housing, and embraced the poor, not just in words, but in action, when in his first trip outside Rome in 2013 to the island of Lampedusa, he called on Europe to do more for those in need and sharply criticized what he called the globalization of indifference. His message was clear: the church must be a field hospital for a wounded world. Pope Francis tackled global issues head-on and traveled extensively to tackle them. He placed the environment at the heart of Catholic teaching. He spoke out against consumerism, war, inequality, and climate change, urging moral responsibility from world leaders, while his fondness of children was well documented. His visit to Muslim countries were a testament to his commitment to interreligious dialogue. In 2019, Pope Francis signed a key document with the Grand Imam of Cairo's Al-Azhar University, both condemning religious extremism. On his trip to Canada in 2022, the Pope apologized to the indigenous people for the Church's role in their persecution. Within the Church, he pushed for dialogue on LGBTQ, inclusion, divorce, and the role of women. Though doctrine remained largely unchanged, his tone marked a shift towards compassion and openness. In an era of division, Pope Francis offered a vision of unity and care. A leader who tried to make the church more human, more humble, and more in touch with the people it serves.
Wow. What do I say? Where do I begin? He was a rock star, I gotta say. John Paul, great guy. Benedict, well, jury's out. But Francis was an absolute, Pope Francis was a rock star. Speaking of rock stars, I want to bring this guy in as soon as possible. Somebody I've been very, very excited to speak to, who's been kind enough to give us time under special request. I've pulled some strings. I've had my wife call him and butter him up. Ladies and gentlemen, I would love to introduce you to the one and only Mr. Andrew Gardner. There he is.
Hello.
Hi, Andrew.
It's great to be with you.
Thank you so much. Before I get started, I just want to say thank you so much. I've asked Joanne, I've spoken to Joanne about this, and I told her what a big fan I am of yours, the work you do with kids, taking kids to Lourdes, your faith, your teaching kids in school, and all the stuff you do. I thought it would be a brilliant time to get you on the air with us and talk about the one and only, the great Pope Francis. So thank you so much. By the way, where are we speaking to? Where are you at right now?
So it is, I'm from Middlesbrough in the northeast of England. Not quite as beautiful as Goa, and it's not quite as warm in Middlesbrough as you're experiencing where you are at the moment. So I've just returned from Sunday Mass, and obviously it was a Mass offered for the happy repose of the soul of Pope Francis. And it's been a sad time for Catholics throughout the world, but I think we're excited about what happens next in the church, about his legacy of mercy and of hope in particular, with it being a Jubilee year.
Yeah.
Exciting.
There was a lot of people that attended it, and I just mentioned after the monologue we just heard, he was an absolute rock star with Muslims, with indigenous people, apologizing about child abuse, including children, kids, the work he did with the poor, prisoners, cleaning feet, kissing feet. He genuinely was a man of the people, of the poor. Loved children, and he did so much in his short, I think, 12, 13 years that he was Pope, to include and invite so many new people that weren't necessarily big on the Catholic religion or bringing back to the Catholic religion. Andrew, I want to ask you a couple of things very quickly to set the stage. By the way, Andrew is my wife's cousin. He's a great friend of ours. He is from the Gardner family, one of my favorite families, Philip and Helen. They've got an open house. They remind me so much of our family. The never-ending food and drink. You can go there at any time. Philip and Helen in Middlesbrough. Andrew, Katie. I got to mention them. I got to say them. Katie and the one and only Dominic. So whenever you go there, it's such a lovely, loving, caring family. Inviting. You can always go there. You're welcome. Andrew has always been one of these people, and I've been intrigued by him because meeting him several times with Joanne, my wife, he's always been a very easy to talk to kind of guy, but he's got oodles and tons of faith. He does a lot of work with kids. He does a lot of teaching. Andrew, what is your profession? What do you currently do right now?
So I'm an assistant head teacher of a very large Catholic secondary school in Darlington, the home of the railways. And my other role is I am the head of Catholic life for 35 Catholic schools. So I oversee spirituality in 5 secondary schools and 30 primary schools. I'm also heavily involved in the work of the Middlesbrough Catholic Fellowship, which is a group for adults and children with learning difficulties. I'm a member of the Knights of St. Columba, which is a Catholic fraternity for men to serve the needs of the bishop in Middlesbrough. And I'm also heavily involved in the diocesan pilgrimage to Lourdes. And I've just returned from the HCPT, International Pilgrimage to Lourdes, which takes disadvantaged and disabled children for a life-changing pilgrimage holiday. So I returned on Friday from a week in Lourdes.
Jeez, oh, flip. That is a long list. Good for you. Thank you so much. There's a lot in there. What's that? How many trips to Lourdes? Listen, he's married. He's got a lovely wife named Christiane. He's got 2 beautiful daughters, Evangeline and Aurora, and they're as pretty as their mom. I've got to say,
They get their looks from their mom.
She's an angel. I tell you what, Christiane, does she travel with you a lot to Lourdes when you do any of this?
So Christiane and I really got to know each other through going to Lourdes each year. We both work in the Akai. It's a hospital where we take about 60 sick people from Middlesbrough. We charter a plane and we take over a ward in the Akai, which is like a hospital. And myself, I'm a brancardier. Christiane's a handmaid, and we literally serve the sick, doing personal care, praying with them, accompanying them, help them to experience Lourdes. And for some people, it'll be their only pilgrimage. We've taken people who've gone to Lourdes and they've actually passed away a few days after they return.
Wow.
We make it possible we take doctors and nurses, healthcare professionals, and it's a real privilege to walk alongside the sick. And there's been 72 official miracles, but I would say that each day in Lourdes is a miracle of people being given that hope to carry on. And for me, it's a real privilege. That's why I go year after year, mostly twice a year, to Lourdes to experience that hope. It's my favourite place.
I can understand, but that sounds so complicated because you're taking a bunch of people there, people with doctors and all that kind of stuff, people that necessarily wouldn't get a chance to go. And after their trip to, like you said, it's life-changing because that's such a beautiful place. It has such a profound influence. I've been to Lourdes once last year, and I'm blown away. I've heard so much about it. It was such a beautiful place, and you, unlike most, would know every little nook and cranny about Lourdes and where to go, what not to go. What are some of your favorites?
Well, I had 42 sixth formers, so that's 16 to 18-year-olds. And
wow.
Lourdes is a real bizarre place because you've got the holiness of the grotto and the sanctuaries, but there are more hotels, bars and restaurants in a square mile than there are in Paris. And my students were saying, Mr. Gardner, why do all of the barmen know you so well? Because as we walk from bar to bar, they're like, Andrew, it's good to see you back. And I would say the beauty is you come to see the mercy of God in the masses and the liturgies, but actually you come to know God through each other, through the drink, through chatting over drinks with friends, through the joy and the sing-songs. And, you know, spirituality isn't just for the chapel. It's for meeting up and having a beer with your friends, because Christ says, where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there am I also. And that's my favourite bit of Lourdes. Yes, it's the grotto, it's the Blessed Sacrament procession, but actually I feel I come to know God mostly through the people who go, that shared affinity, I suppose, of helping and supporting one another. So that my favourite bits are, of course, the grotto, the basilicas, but it's the meeting of the people, because in the people is where you come to meet Christ in a really special way. And I think Pope Francis emphasises that, you know, that it's not all about liturgy and it's not all about dogma and rules. It's about the person, and can we meet the person of Jesus in the sick, in the vulnerable, but also in the friends that we walk along the road with.
You mentioned the people you speak to. We were there, and I don't know what it's called. It started to rain when we were there, and we went into this massive underground, like a chapel, Andrew.
Yeah, it's the Basilica of St. Pius X.
There must have been probably a couple of thousand people, yeah? And it was so nice because everybody is so engrossed and focused on Mass and their faith. And you walk around and they've got all these banners and flags of all the saints. Yeah. And it's such an engrossing, that's exactly. Can people see this on there? Can people see this on the show? Will they see these pictures?
Yeah.
It is absolutely mind-blowing. You've got people from everywhere in the world. And not just there's thousands of people, but in talking to people and speaking and interacting with people walk side by side, shoulder to shoulder, candles, and then you get a chance to interact with them. It is amazing that you've got Catholics from all around the world that come and visit this place. Like you said, it's nice to be able to, not just for the religious part of it, but you learn so much about the religion in interacting and speaking to people. You mentioned Pope Francis. I want to get your take. You'd be somebody I'd love to talk to about your interactions. How many times have you actually gotten to meet the Pontiff?
So I've only been in the presence of the Pope once. I was in the presence of Pope Benedict when I was about 21 when he visited.
A lovely picture of you.
So I met Pope Benedict, and we always say that Pope Benedict was all about the law and about the teachings of the church, whereas Pope Francis taught us how to actually how to live that law of love. So the Pope was elected in 2013, and my wife and I got married on the 21st of December 2014. and it was a Jubilee year. It was the year of mercy, the Jubilee year of mercy. And so we arranged to go on a pilgrimage to Lourdes in the following February. And when we got there, we realised that the Pope was on an apostolic visit somewhere else. So instead of seeing the Pope, we just ate too much pizza and pasta and wine. And then 5 weeks later, we returned to Lourdes. And a funny story about that. If you were married within the year, you can apply to the Apostolic Palace to meet the Holy Father wearing your wedding clothes. And I just returned from a school pilgrimage to Lourdes, and we were putting the cases in my parents-in-law's car, and we got to Stansted Airport, and we opened the boot, and Christian said, "Andrew, where's the suitcase with the wedding gear in, the veil and the wedding dress?" And I'd left the case on the bed back at home in Middlesbrough, which is 3.5 hours drive. And so my dad had to drive and had to meet us halfway to deliver us the suitcase. And my wife said to me, she said, "Well, I don't know about meeting the Pope, but we could ask him to sign the divorce papers when we get there." She was so frustrated with me. But yes, so on the morning, the papal audience always takes place on a Wednesday, and it was lovely weather. It was outside. And we had the great honour of meeting the Holy Father.
We're looking at pictures. I don't know if you can see this, Andrew. We're looking at beautiful pictures of you.
Yeah, so that we were able to line up with the other newlyweds from around the world, and we were given a short time to say something. And when the Holy Father came to us, me and Christian was so overwhelmed, we didn't really know what to say. I think we just said hello. And it's interesting, that picture there you've just shown of the guy in red, that's Cardinal Roach. And he's from Leeds. Well, he's from Leeds.
Yeah.
And he's a contender, I suppose, for the next papacy. I just thought I'd mention that while the picture came up there, the guy in red.
Yeah.
But for me, Pope Francis, he highlighted what it means to be merciful. So I don't know what it's like in Catholicism in India, but I'm aware in America, it's a lot about the rights and wrongs and who's in and who's out. In America, there's a lot of talk about pro-life, pro-choice, and some things, I don't want to offend Americans watching, but something that horrifies me sometimes when I look at the Catholic Church in America is it's always about the rules and regulations. This politician can't receive communion. This politician says this politician says that. Well, the pontificate of Pope Francis, he said to someone who talked about being homosexual, he said, "Who am I to judge?"
Yeah.
And I think what Pope Francis is about is, when we look at Jesus and we look at the Sacred Heart of Jesus, his heart isn't burning for love with just those who are righteous and who are wonderful. His heart burns for love for everybody. And I think he highlights for Catholics about how do we become more like Jesus, walking with the marginalised, the sick, the poor. And I know he upset your man Trump when he said that we should be building bridges, we shouldn't be building walls.
Absolutely.
And I thought it was, I don't know whether irony is the right word, but seeing Donald Trump with a front row seat with the Pope, because the Pope had no fear of putting him in his place, of saying, that to be a Christian, to be pro-life is to be pro-life in every aspect. You can't just say you're pro-life with the unborn in the womb. You've got to be pro-life with those on death row. You've got to be pro-life with those who are in war-torn places. If we value life, we have to value life in all forms. And I think that, for me, is the takeaway of Pope Francis. Is like, if you say you're a Catholic, put your money where your mouth is.
There you go. And he walked the walk, yeah? So you mentioned about the fact that he said, "Who am I to judge?" Now, this is the leader of the church, the most holy of the holiest. And if he can turn around and say, "Who am I to judge?" Who the heck are we to judge when people talk about this is right and this is wrong, and you make all these judgments, I love the fact that you mentioned about Benedict. Benedict was a lot more strict. Would you consider Benedict was a theologian? How would you describe Benedict compared to Francis?
Well, people talk a lot about, I preferred this Pope to another Pope, but my degree is in Catholic theology. So a lot of my studies at university were on the writings of Pope Benedict. And Pope Benedict, you would talk about Pope Francis being a pastor. You can imagine him as your parish priest or as an old uncle. Pope Benedict was a an academic, and I would say that the writings of Pope Benedict talk a lot about mercy and hope, but with Pope Francis we saw it in a more real sense by the way that he lived. Like Pope Benedict lived in the Apostolic Palace. He wore the Prada shoes. He wore the finest ermine cassock. Yeah. Whereas Pope Francis chose to live in Casa San Marta, which is like a bed and breakfast. He had a normal bedroom. I don't know if you've seen the photographs of Pope Francis's bedroom, but there's literally nothing in it. There's a bed, a desk, and a little side table. And Benedict was a lot about tradition. And so the traditionalist Catholics really loved Pope Benedict, and other Catholics today feel that Pope Francis was too progressive. You know, Pope Francis washed the feet of female prisoners.
That's right.
And you know, Pope Benedict would never have done that. Pope Francis, he was all about making sure that everybody felt included. And sometimes Pope Benedict's writings could seem a little bit autocratic, authoritarian. But I would say I love Pope Benedict also, but he was more of an academic. He taught what the church teaches. Pope Francis enabled us to experience how Christ wants us to walk, and that's the key difference. And really, Pope Francis hasn't changed any church teachings. He's just told us that we must be merciful. And, you know, the church might say one thing about divorced and remarried Catholics not receiving communion. The church says something. And Pope Benedict talked a lot about in a perfect world. Well, Pope Francis is well aware, being from Argentina, that we don't live in a perfect world, and we're human, and we're within the church, you know. The church has a fine place to judge because it's a cesspit at times, you know.
Bureaucracy.
And you look at the abuse scandals that have marred the church everywhere, even within my own diocese. You know, in my own diocese we had the largest child abuse claim that had ever been through the British government. Wow. It was, I think, £12 million. And you know, the church can say one thing, and you can say, you know, this is what the church teaches, but when we look at the damage caused by the people who make up the church, you know, Pope Francis is well aware of that. He met with abuse survivors,
and he spoke about it, right?
Yeah, and I know when he went to St. Patrick's Cathedral in America, he actually held an audience with those who'd been affected by clerical abuse. And today's Divine Mercy Sunday, and where the filth and the dirt is the worst, God's mercy is greater still. And Pope Francis was who we needed at the time. What concerns me slightly now is I hope that the next pope that we have follows in that vein of mercy, and doesn't go back to the autocratic days of, you know, who can receive communion and who can get married in the Catholic Church, but really live in that message of mercy and of hope for all.
And people that need religion, people that love the religion. I'm born and raised Catholic. I don't go to church every Sunday, but I've got oodles and oodles. I mean, I believe. I've got tons of faith brought on and taught to me by my parents, my family, my sisters, everybody. We've got loads of faith. I had moved, and I'd spoken to people of my generation that had moved so far away from the Catholic Church because they were so ready to preach from a pulpit. But then Pope Francis came along, and he did the things you mentioned. He cleaned the feet of prisoners. He spoke about all the things that had been swept under the rug for many, many years, that this generation wanted to talk about, the abuse. And he didn't make it a taboo subject. He was happy to speak about it, and he condemned it, which is what you want.
And I think that you have to, you know, it's the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
And it's like the church in Ireland. The church in Ireland has been pretty much obliterated. Sunday masses at an all-time low. And, you know, you can't blame people for that. And I think that Pope Francis once said that a bishop should smell like the sheep that he leads. And I think that's important, that Pope Francis, you know, he walks along with people. And he reformed the Curia, so like all of the cardinals in Rome. There's been a lot of financial mismanagement in the Vatican. And Pope Francis challenged it, and he said, you know what, we're not having it. And so I don't know how popular he was amongst the cardinals, because he basically said carnival. I don't know if this is true, but when he was elected and they brought him out onto the balcony at St. Peter's, they asked him if he wanted to wear the big fancy vestments, and he turned to the person dressing him and said, "Carnival time is over." You know, and I think that sums it up for me. Carnival time is over. We're ready to make something happen here. We want we want the world to see that the Catholic Church is still relevant, and that there's a place for everyone within it.
It's so funny because there's so many, and here now again in this day and age with AI, with the internet, with being able to generate false imagery and just make up stuff. There were a couple things at the end of his funeral. Supposedly, he had said in his will that he wanted people or homeless or the marginalized people to be the last people that saw him. Do you know? Is that true? Do you know about that?
Yes. So he's the first pope in centuries to not be buried in St. Peter's.
Yes, correct.
And so he was taken to St. Mary Major, which is another basilica in Rome. And there is an image of Our Lady, and I'm going to get it wrong here. I've written it down. And it's the image. It's a Byzantine image, and she's called Mary, Protector of the Romans. And he used to go and pray there before and after every visit. But the fact he's there, he's been buried in Mary Major, is a sign of he doesn't want it to be about him. Yeah. He wants it to be about the Lord and about Mary pointing us to know Jesus. But the most beautiful thing, and it wasn't on camera, so if you were watching the if you were watching the funeral yesterday, this was the one bit that wasn't filmed. That his coffin was greeted by people who were transgender. People who were homosexual, the poor and children, and they were the ones. It wasn't scores and scores of cardinals and archbishops. It was people who were transgender, and I think that's so important because in the UK, I don't know how much you keep up with the news in the United Kingdom, but there's been a lot of discussion about what a definition of a female is in the UK, and it's led to people who are transgender feeling so uncomfortable and wondering where they fit in. And I just don't know whether the Holy Spirit was working through Pope Francis when he made these choices, because who were the people to see Pope Francis placed into his tomb? Well, actually, it was people who were transgender, because God loves all. Absolutely. There isn't a caveat with God's love, and I think that Pope Francis inviting those people is just like the most beautiful act of humility and love that is possible, and the world sees that. And I think that I haven't read the Catholic papers today, but no doubt there'll be some papers throughout the world who will criticise the Holy Father for doing that, but I just think it's perfect.
I think it's beautiful.
Andrew, I have a question. This is Joy here. Is that the reason why Pope Francis didn't say anything when we had the controversy regarding the Paris Olympics? Is that why?
Oh, about the image of the Last Supper?
That's right.
Well, for me, working in a school, obviously, I work with young people, and I would say I'm speaking for Pope Francis that, you know, the Lord is far greater than Jesus doesn't get offended because he's God. So I think that, you know, the fact that there was discussion about that image at the Paris Olympics, I think was an opportunity for evangelization. It allowed us to talk about the Last Supper. I myself, as a Catholic, wasn't offended by that, because I thought, you know what, it was an artistic interpretation. And around the Last Supper, if you think about the disciples, it was full of tax collectors, people who were sinners. Mary Magdalene was there, who the church has told us for centuries was a prostitute. There's actually no proof of that at all. But for me, who would be gathered around the Last Supper? Well, it would be people who didn't fit in, because the disciples didn't fit in either. So I didn't see any offense. I didn't take any offense in that at the Paris Olympics. In fact, it made me laugh that it caused so much uproar amongst the traditional Catholics, because, you know, we wasted so much energy talking about what was happening at the Paris Olympics when we should have been talking about the atrocities of the Ukrainian, what's happening to the Ukrainian people, and what was happening in the Holy Land. You know, if we spent half as much time talking about the atrocities in the Holy Land rather than talking about the offence to the Catholic Church about some people who are transgender being portrayed in the Last Supper image. You know, does it matter? Does it offend the Lord? Not at all, because he's God.
Yeah.
He's got bigger fish to fry.
He's got bigger things to worry about, and these kind of things don't embarrass, they don't shock, they don't scare him. Another, you mentioned about the people, the last people that saw him. Also, another way that actually blew my mind is seeing Vladimir Zelensky and Donald Trump sitting in the space right where the Pope was laying in state. Now, Pope Francis would have loved to see something happen about this. Yeah, how cool is that? Talk about that.
I just think that, you know, we had that awfully uncomfortable, and see, I don't know, I know that you'll have a lot of people in America watching, so I don't want to offend, but...
You're not offending anybody. Speak your mind, my friend.
In the United Kingdom, well, I'll go back. I was in Rome at the start of Lent, okay, and we prayed the Rosary for Pope Francis, and I was on the bus. It was packed. I was on the bus with some people from America. And they were saying to me, oh, you know, people in the UK, they've got the wrong idea about President Trump. Catholics love President Trump. And I'm there, I'm horrified. I'm like, oh, my Lord, well, you must see a very different Trump to what the rest of the world sees. But the way that the way that Trump and Vance treated Zelensky when he visited the White House,
horrible.
To me, I was mortified. But... in St. Peter's Basilica, where there was no interview, there was no pomp and circumstance, it was two men speaking to each other. And I don't know Trump personally, but I would hope that, inspired by Pope Francis, that the discussion that they had in the Basilica will have probably done far more good than anything that was said at that awful meeting in the White House.
That was Pope Francis all the way, bringing these two together. This would have never happened anywhere else at any other time. This is at Pope Francis's funeral that he brought these people, and he wanted peace so badly. To get these two world leaders, nobody else, not even interpreters around, just two men sitting face to face talking about the potential for peace.
I also think that it's a Jubilee year in the whole of the church. It's called the Jubilee Year of Hope.
Andrew, explain that. What is that? I don't understand what the Jubilee years.
So every 25 years, the church has a year of special Jubilee. So the last one was the Great Millennium. And the Holy Father at the time always creates a theme. And the Pope this year, in preparation for this year, Pope Francis chose the year to be Spes non confundit in Latin. That means hope never disappoints, or hope doesn't disappoint. It's from the St. Paul's letter to the Romans. And I think the fact that he died during a Jubilee year that he'd instituted as the Jubilee Year of Hope says something really, really important about all of the challenges that the world is facing currently. You know, hope doesn't disappoint. He died on Easter Monday, the great resurrection of Jesus on the Sunday. You know, that hope that, you know, death isn't the end and pain and suffering doesn't have the last word. He died on, he'd already blessed the people at the earlier Orbe.
He actually insisted on actually doing his round, right? His Easter Sunday round, right? He wasn't supposed to, but he forced them to do it, right?
Yeah, and you know, I think he must have known that his hours were close. He was close to death, because when we were there it was early March we were there, and we went twice to St. Peter's to pray the Rosary, because we were sure he was going to die whilst we were there. But he obviously had work left to do. There was things left to do. He had to hang on.
Wow.
And I just hope that his legacy of mercy in the church is going to be one that remains. And I hope that the cardinals listen very carefully to the homily that the cardinal gave yesterday at his funeral about Pope Francis and his call for hope and his call for all people to find a place in the church.
You know, you bring me to a perfect point in this discussion. You mentioned something earlier. Pope Francis changed and he rubbed a lot of people up the wrong way because he was doing good. He wanted to do good. The Catholic Church is just red tape and bureaucracy. And it's scary because now the man that was actually doing and making the positive changes is gone. He's elected probably 70, 80, 90% of these cardinals that are there that are left behind. And how, and it's a huge question to try and figure out how these guys, without his guidance, without his watch, I hope they take it in the right direction. How do you think, I've always been intrigued by the conclave and how the next steps to elect a new pope. You've got so many people that are there left behind that are going to make these very important decisions for the Catholic Church. Pope Francis was really a one in a million compared to Benedict and all these other the popes. These gentlemen that are left behind to vote the next pope in, how do you think, or how does the process work to get the next person to be so much more and see some of the greatness that Pope Francis did to get the right person to lead the church next?
Well, I think that, as you say, the Holy Father selected the vast majority of cardinals who are under, because you can only vote as a cardinal if you're under the age of 80. So many of them that have been selected have been appointed by Pope Francis, and there's more than ever from African nations. More cardinals have been installed by the Pope.
Southeast Asia also,
yes,
right?
Southeast Asia, yeah, and I think that gives great hope because they are men after the heart of Pope Francis. But also, the one thing that we have to bear in mind is that globalization's had a massive effect on the church, and the church in the United Kingdom to the church in India would be very, very different because it's affected by the people who live here, it's affected by the media, etc. So my hope is just that we don't become a church of just one issue, because sometimes, for me, I feel that all we seem to talk about is abortion and condoms. When you talk about the Catholic Church, that's what you talk about. You talk about contraception, and you talk about abortion. There are far more issues. They are very serious moral issues, but there are so much more moral issues that the Church has to help the world to address. And the Church has a valid, it has a voice. There's 1.2 billion Catholics in the world. And so what the Pope says has a massive impact on the way that people vote and the way that we interpret what's going on in the world today. So I just think that we can't think about a Pope on one issue. It's got to be on who's going to be best for the global church. And it's also important to note that the cardinals don't choose the next Pope. The Holy Spirit does. The Holy Spirit works through the cardinals for the person who's right for that time.
That's the scary point. That's a thought that I was making. Actually, the point I was making was these guys are left behind to make the next decision, the decision for the next pope, and it's a lot of prayer. There's 2 votes a day, and by the way, they just put a picture of our own cardinal from Goa, Philip Neri Ferrao. He's going to be part of the conclave, I think.
Yeah.
He is a gentleman here, a local legend. So I'm voting for him myself, but I'm not a cardinal. I'm way under 80. I do hope that the decision they make and how they come across, the next pope can be anything as big as small a part as Pope Francis was, and what an impression he made on the world, Catholic and non-Catholic.
And I think that what you've said there about a cardinal from an Indian nation, from India, is also so significant, because in where I teach in Darlington, we have, over the last 6 years, we have had so many Indian children join our school. They're from Kerala.
Put this picture up.
They're from Kerala, and they're part of the Malayalam rite. Within the Catholic Church, there are many different rites. There isn't just the Roman rite. But what I would say is that the Indian children that I've come across in school are so on fire with their faith, and it would be good to see a pope that comes from a nation that isn't in Europe. because the faith in Europe is at an all-time low, but we know that in India it's strong. So, having someone who's not white as a pontiff would be a powerful expression to the world that the Catholic Church is in fact a global family and we're all brothers and sisters. That for me would be incredibly special, to have a pope that isn't from Italy, to have a pope that isn't from an English-speaking nation or
a white pope.
Yeah, basically, yeah. And I don't know if you've watched the film Conclave, if it's out over there. It's on Prime, and not that I don't work for Prime, but it's on Prime Video, I think, at the minute. And we watched it last night, Christian and I, and it's so accurate. It's so accurate. They've done so well with how it's set up, but I think that people get a bit into the drama of Conclave about these votes and the white smoke and the dark smoke and all that. Because ultimately, it's a bunch of elderly gentlemen deciding what will happen in the church going forward. And I think that it needs to be the prayer of all Catholics throughout the world to just pray for someone who's merciful. Pray for someone who you could have round. Like, I can imagine Pope Francis going to my mum's for tea. Being a normal person. It's not. I don't know if you've got the picture of when I'm kissing the Pope's hand.
We do. Put it up.
Now it's interesting that at that point in his pontificate, he used to allow people to kiss the hand of the pontiff.
Kiss the ring.
Yeah. Well, the Pope has now stopped people doing that because he said, no, it's not about me. It's not about me. I'm just a normal human being. It's not about kissing the Pope's hand, kissing the ring of the Holy Father. It's about focusing on Jesus rather than on the office of the Pope. And I don't know if you saw in the coffin of the Pope, the shoes that the Pope was wearing. I don't know if you've seen that or it's been in the media in Goa. But his shoes were absolutely battered. They were absolutely battered. And for me, I just thought that's a statement in itself. It's a guy who is just a normal person. He used to ride on the metro in Argentina to work. And there's a few anecdotes that say that he used to walk in Rome, even as Pope, like undercover. And there was a few days before he died, when he'd been released from the Jubilee hospital, he went to St. Peter's and he was wearing like his pajamas and slippers and a poncho. I don't know if you saw that picture.
I did.
And I read the National Catholic Register, which is a very traditionalist publication in America, part of EWTN, and they were saying what a disgrace it is, the Pope with his oxygen tank and his poncho on and wearing his pajamas. What a disgrace. But for me, I thought it was absolutely beautiful to see a man who didn't care what he looked like, and he blessed a child, I think. He had time for people, and I think that's what we have. That's what we have in Pope Francis, someone who is, he smells like the sheep and he gives us a model to follow. And he wasn't a saint. If you see, there's some images of him losing his temper.
Yeah.
That's good too, to show that, we're all human.
Absolutely. Yeah. We isn't that what it's all about? I mean, we've got a picture. Put that picture back up, Ajay. That's a brilliant picture of his battered shoes. I tell you what, Andrew, that speaks volumes. He's not about the pomp and circumstance. He's not about the fancy because I'm the Pope. He's about bringing the flock together. And that's something I felt very strongly about over the last few years as a Catholic person. We have lost a whole generation of Catholics, of young people, of people that would normally, back in the day, in my mom and dad's time, there were loads of people going to church. The masses, there weren't enough masses in English. There weren't enough masses, full stop. There was always crowded. And you've seen over time that you're losing a lot of these people, a lot of the young generation, along the younger next generation that don't feel the connection to the Catholic Church and what the faith is all about. And that's what Pope Francis was doing in spades. He did such a brilliant job and made people like myself feel that we were glad to, he made us understand the faith that we believed in and why we and our parents went to church in the first place.
Yeah, and I think that the church of the past was about fire and damnation, and if you don't go to Mass on a Sunday, you'll burn in hell. Yeah. And if you eat meat on a Friday, you'll go to hell. And Joanne will know from her childhood being brought up that clergy used to be like that. You would fear the priest. And Pope Francis had a real issue with what we call clericalism, where the priest is up here and the people are down here. And what the priest said goes. And in a way, I'm not saying that the clerical abuse is been a good thing for the church, but actually it's knocked the priest off the pedestal. And it's actually shown that we're all sinners. And, you know, in the Mass, when the priest holds up the body and blood of Jesus and he says, "Behold the Lamb of God," and we all say, "Lord, I'm not worthy that you should enter under my roof." Now, ultimately, no one is worthy. So regardless whether you haven't been to Mass for a long time or you've not been to confession, there isn't one person that goes to Mass, who goes to Holy Communion, who's worthy of receiving Jesus.
Absolutely.
Or like in the Gospel, it says, "I've come not for the righteous, but for sinners." Jesus says you don't go to a doctor if you're well, you go to a doctor if you're sick. And so basically, when we talk about the Eucharist, we talk about Christ, we all go to him broken. And as soon as we start to think that we're better than anybody else, that's the moment where we're not worthy to go at the altar at all, because we have to go as a sinner, because we all are. And I think Pope Francis highlights that immensely. The church of the past of being up on a pedestal's gone. And I actually think that that's a blessing.
Yeah, it's a blessing. It is a blessing, but the fact of the matter remains, he leaves a huge set of shoes to fill.
Yeah, definitely.
And I hope, there you go. I hope we get blessed, and the next Pope is as good, if not better. And there will be nobody better than Pope Francis, but we get a really, really good, charismatic priest. I wanted to talk about a Jesuit. My uncle was a Jesuit. You mentioned about doing the work of God. I still remember in back in the day when they used to go out and preach the missions to the poor, he would be filthy. They'd be in muck doing his work, and we always looked up to Uncle Demi, because no matter, he was Father Desmond to most, and he was like really, really looked up to. And when he was home with us, you could speak to him and discuss and ask him any question you wanted to. He was so down to earth, very accessible, but he actually walked the walk. And we saw that in Pope Francis as a Jesuit, who actually, he didn't want any of the pomp and circumstance. He just wanted to do God's work, unite people, bring them back to the church. No?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think that the fact that Pope Francis was a Jesuit, and if I'm not wrong, I think he's the first ever Jesuit to become Pope.
Is he? Yeah, he is.
He chose the name Francis. Now, St. Francis gave up a life of wealth to live in total poverty. And, you know, even the choice of name was very, very clear about what kind of pontificate he was going to have. It was going to be about the environment, and it was going to be about the poor. He wanted a church that was ran for the poor, a church for the poor. And you talk about the missions, and what's really interesting is in Middlesbrough, where I live, we used to send missionaries to India to convert the people of India to Catholicism. What's interesting nowadays is that we have Indian priests converting the people of Middlesbrough. It's gone full circle. So we've had some beautiful priests, Father Anil, Father Xavier, who are in Middlesbrough diocese, actually converting the people, because actually the people in the UK have forgotten what it means to walk with Christ, and we're blessed to have people in India. You've got in a way too many priests for the people, and you're being so generous sending them over to us, and it's a blessing. But they're priests that are walking with the people.
These guys here in India, we've got in Southeast Asia in general. Are those the two he's talking about? Possibly.
I'm thinking, yes, as mentioned.
Yes, that's them, Anil and Xavier, that's right. Yeah.
Are they in Middlesbrough, yeah? They're two priests from India in Middlesbrough.
Father Anil has moved back, and I think they were Redemptorist priests. I think they're from a religious order, but they were a great blessing to the church here in Middlesbrough, because you can become very aware of your own way of life. It's good to hear from somebody else. You know, we've had priests from Nigeria come to Middlesbrough. And it is a blessing, because we're a global church, we're a global family. Christ wasn't white, and I think, you know, it's good to see to see the church as a global family, and we do that by having these wonderful clergy come over, who get mucked in. You know, they're mucking. We were doing some gardening up at the Lady Chapel in Osmotherley. It's a shrine to Mary, and the priests were actually mucking in, putting up canopies and tents. You know, getting dirty, doing, not just wearing the fancy vestments and preaching, but actually putting faith into action.
Getting down and dirty. You've got a large population in Southeast Asia of Catholics. In the Philippines and India, you've mentioned a couple of, and I do hope what you said comes true, is actually true about the Cardinals voting in somebody who the people can relate to.
Yeah,
We've seen somebody different, you know?
Yeah. There's a guy called Cardinal Tagle, and he's
Filipino.
from the Philippines. And if he gets in, I will be so happy, because I've met him. He's been to Newcastle, which is close to Middlesbrough. I've met him. He's a wonderful guy. I've heard him speak, and he speaks very much of the same heart as Pope Francis. But for many people, they would say that he's too progressive.
Too progressive. Wow.
Yeah. But he's wonderful. He spoke to about 10,000 young people in Wembley Arena a few years ago, and he's wonderful. So we'll just have to see what happens.
We'll have to pray really, really hard that this is the next Pope. Yeah. There are a lot of cardinals. I don't know how many there are. The 180 odd cardinals are going to be part of the.
Yeah.
And they're locked like that. That's a whole different topic. These guys are locked into the Sistine Chapel for as long as it takes. Back in the day, it took 3 years, but now more recently it's a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of days. Andrew, can you very quickly can explain how that process works to elect a pope?
Yes, so all the popes that are under the age of 80 are eligible to vote. Yeah. And actually, any Catholic male that's being baptized can be made pope. So Merv, they might come knocking on your door. You might be. It hasn't happened in centuries for it not to be a serving cardinal. So they will stay in Casa San Marta, where the Pope lived, and they will go to the Sistine Chapel each day, and I don't know what the role of the cardinal is, but one of them will say extra omnes, which means everybody out, and the doors of the Sistine Chapel are locked, and they will make their votes, and they will stay. So after each round of votes, they will set off. They will burn the votes in a small fire, and up in the chimney they will add a dark grey colouring or a white colouring, depending about whether we get a pope. And then we'll have the guy, when eventually they've got the right number of votes, there will be a cardinal who will go out and he'll say, Gaudium Magnum, Habemus Papam, great joy, we have a pope. And let's just hope he calls the name Cardinal Tagle of the Philippines. That's who I would love to be called. But it's the way that the film Conclave shares it, it's a bit very dramatic and political. And my prayer is that it's not political and it's guided by the Spirit. And they always say that if you go into the conclave as cardinal wanting to be pope, you will come out as cardinal. But if you go into conclave not wanting to be pope, you'll be made pope. Basically, it's better to have someone who doesn't want the role, someone who has that humility, because God can do amazing things with broken vessels. You know, the person who goes in with the desire to be pope, who's picked his name already, who's deciding what kind of pectoral cross he'll wear, that's the kind of person you do not want. You know that in your jobs though, don't you? You want a reluctant leader, the person who feels they're not good enough. That's the one who you want to lead the church moving forward.
It's so true, because the more I think about it, we've had these discussions before, it is the biggest corporation in the world. The Catholic Church owns the most number of prime properties. They've got funds, they've got everything. And you genuinely hear all the stories about the corruption and the stuff that happens that you don't want to be associated with the Catholic Church. So it is so important for a religion that we so firmly believe in. And I hope and pray, like you're saying, it has to be the right person that can take charge of such a massive corporation. But Andrew, there's so many. It's hard to be somebody who's a head of a corporation, to be the head of the church and focus on religion and the teachings and the principle of religion, when there's so many other things like running a corporation where you've got the finances, you've got the rules and regulations, you've got so many other things that have to be managed by the rest of the people in your organization. It's hard. It's very difficult to understand how a pope can focus on building and growing a relationship when you've got or a religion, when you've got so many other things you need to focus on. It's become so politicized, it's become so bureaucratic, it's become really, really tough to focus on what's the most important part, which is the actual religion, no?
Yeah, and I would say that money can be a great distractor. So in the Gospel of Mark, Jesus says that it's harder for a rich man to get into heaven than for someone for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle. And I think that when we talk about the Holy Roman Church, I think that we get so bogged down with the actual corporation, whereas the church is the body of Jesus. It's you and me. It's all members of the church. And when you hear the scandals and the corruption, you can be totally like, no wonder people leave the church. But obviously I was in Lourdes last week, and with the children who are disabled and children from disadvantaged backgrounds, and I'm just going to encourage your listeners to go onto YouTube and type in the HCPT Trust Mass, right? And it will give the people listening great hope for the future, because it's a massive...
Again. Sorry, Andrew, say it one more time. What is it?
Sorry, it's the HCPT Trust Mass, and it's a mass like no other. And the reason that I bring it up is because people need to see young people, and the church is actually alive. There might be corruption and there might be trouble in the Vatican offices, but actually the church is really alive. And we can get so bogged down with the worry about, falling mass attendance. But really, I have no fear for the church of the future, because the church is Christ. And it might be a church that's smaller. There you can see people dancing.
Check that out, dude. That is so cool.
See young people up, and then you see they're wearing funny costumes, they've got their kilts on and all of that. That's the church, and that's the church of Pope Francis. Not in Latin, not with incense, not with fancy costumes, etc. It's with people dancing, it's with people using TikTok to inspire. That's the future.
Wow.
The church is full of joy. And we have to get back to a church that's full of joy. Pope Francis said in his document Evangelii Gaudium, which means the joy of the gospel, he said Catholics leave church like they're leaving a funeral mass. And he said we shouldn't be leaving church like a funeral mass. We should be leaving full of joy, because the Lord has redeemed us, and so therefore we've got to share. Catholic faith should be infectious. People should see you full of joy and say, I want to be a part of that.
I want to be like that, yeah.
Exactly. And if Jesus has redeemed us, what more joy can we have? And so it doesn't matter what somebody's sexuality is, what somebody's marital status is. They're a child of God, and we've got to love them. And that's ultimately the message of the gospel in a nutshell.
You've just said something so enlightening, something that's made me so happy, because I didn't know about this. If anybody wants to check it out, it is HCPT. Can you put it up on the screen? I can't see that.
It's called Hosanna House
Trust Mass.
Children's Pilgrimage Trust. And it's really, really amazing. If you follow them on Facebook, you'll see some funny pictures of me dressed up in angel wings and a halo with face paint on, and you'll see priests wearing fancy dress.
Yeah.
And some of our traditionalists would say that it's an abomination, but I think that's what heaven's going to be like.
Absolutely. It's everybody's interpretation of what you think the religion is about. You got to include everybody. You mentioned something so interesting. My niece, I love her to bits. Priyanka is taking up this. She loves it, by the way. She teaches youngsters. Is it catechism? I don't know if it's catechism, but she has.
Yeah.
she does this every Sunday, and she really prepares and works so hard to get these 10 young boys to come in and then teach them about religion. And it must be so difficult, and she tries her best to figure out interesting and intriguing and ways to get their attention, to keep them there and understand what the faith is all about. I can't wait to tell her about this. HCPT.
And there are nationals, so there is an American Children's Pilgrimage Trust. We're present in Croatia. We're present in Germany. It's like a branch of HCPT, and it's a wonderful charity. But it's mass like you've never known before. And what's really interesting, Merv, is that loads of people who go to Lourdes with HCPT are not Catholic. They just go to serve. Of the 42 children I took to Lourdes, I would say maybe 8 of them are not Catholic. And I don't know whether it's helped them to understand Catholicism better, but they've come back better people because they've witnessed what it is to serve. I'm just going to give a quote of Pope Francis, and he says, "The future has a name, and the name of the future is hope."
Wow.
And I really believe that. I believe the church has a bright future, but only if we become a church of everybody, not just of the selective few.
It's the next generation that has to pick up that and run with it, you know what I mean? And it makes it hard, and I've said this so many times, with the old fuddy-duddy ways of our church, our generational church, that pushes people so far away. Goa is got some beautiful churches. We've spoken about this. My sister and brother-in-law did a trip to Portugal, and I don't know what it's called. I've forgotten the Camino Trail.
The Camino to Compostela in Spain.
Yes, they did that 100 kilometer walk, whatever, few days. We've got a load of churches here in Goa. This, Andrew, you've got to come and visit us, by the way. Joanna's been talking about it. You have to. We threatened your brother numerous times when he was in Delhi to come and visit us, and he said, yeah, and he never made it. But you will be the first. We're going to make sure that you come and visit us. We've got so many beautiful churches and temples and historic sites. But for the Catholics here in Goa, we take it for granted. We've got St. Francis Xavier's, the old Goa church here. There's loads of churches that people come to. And it's just a shame because there is that disconnect between the old generation and the children of today. Nowadays, priests here in Goa, they think they walk on water. It is very hard to approach them and have them interrelate or relate to the next generation. We have some of the most beautiful sites, and just like the Compostela, the trail, you could actually do a trip and visit all these historic, beautiful churches, historical sites. It excites me because there's loads of people that travel from all over the world to come and visit these sites. But this is all part of the religion that people that they overlook. They don't see it because the most common thing is going to Sunday Mass. And when you go to Sunday Mass, you've got this ritual that you don't relate to, you can't understand to. You can't understand exactly what's going on because it's like yesteryear. It's old school, right? So you somebody like you who's looking for that connection to teach young people how to come back to church would really, really do well here in Goa. I'd love you to come here and check out what we've got. Even as Goans, I'd love the priests to relate more to the next generation, the youngsters, and try to get them back to the church in a different way, like this HCPT, this mass you're showing. I hope a lot of people log in and check it out on Facebook. You were going to ask, Ajwa, you had something. You were going to ask a question. I was just
going to say, talking about India. So today in the Gospel at Mass today talks about doubting Thomas. You know, he says, where if I don't put my fingers in the holes made by the nails, I won't believe. Now, Thomas is very important for Indian Catholics because he actually brought the Christian faith to India. So how funny that I'm speaking to you today, and the Gospel in every Mass in every part of the world talks about St. Thomas, because St. Thomas, when he saw the risen Jesus, that's where he went. He went to India and he converted people in India to the faith. So it's like it's a special day, I suppose, to remember that you know, how did Thomas come to know Jesus? Well, he came to know him through his actions in the flesh. How do we come to know Jesus? We see it through the actions of others. You know, we've got to be Jesus for one another. How do we do that? Well, we show mercy, we show love, we have a laugh. You know, laughter, when we laugh and when we have jokes, etc., that's God working through us too. Pope Francis, I don't know if you saw last year, he had a circus act, came to his audience, and there was like jugglers and all of that, and Pope Francis laughed along with it. There was a little child, I don't know if you've ever seen this, where sometimes Evangeline and Aurora will get out of our hands at church, out of our arms, go and run, and they'll try and get on the altar. A child did that with Pope Francis. What did Pope Francis do? He picked up the child and sat them on his knee and continued his speech. That's what it's about, you know. Sometimes we take ourselves too seriously.
Look at that, yeah.
Sometimes we take ourselves too seriously. We've got to be like Pope Francis and say, you know what? Jesus has risen from the dead. We've got to be a people of joy and a people of laughter, and we've got to share that hope with others, not condemning people, but actually celebrating and saying, you know what? The kingdom of God is for everybody, and you've got to make it infectious. You've got to say, you know what? Being part of this will change your life. Like, and can you imagine with Pope Benedict having a circus act there?
Are you kidding me?
Pope Francis is just. I've got a mug that the kids laugh at school when I'm drinking my coffee, and it has a cartoon of Pope Francis, and it just says, "Pope Francis is my homeboy," and I just think, like, you know, he's a great inspiration to me, and I'm so blessed that me and Christiane met him, and. I was in Lourdes when I found out he died, and I rang Christiane, and we had a bit of a tear.
Yeah.
And we because you think of him as like an uncle.
Yeah.
Someone who's just totally normal. And Evangeline, God love her. Evangeline, I brought her back a little statue of Pope Francis, and she's put it on her bedside table, and she's got a little Vatican flag. And she prayed the rosary the night he died. She prayed a decade of the rosary. She's only 5.
Aww.
And I don't know whether that she's been totally indoctrinated by us or whether she's full of the spirit, but she loves Pope Francis too, and was talking about him like he was part of the family. But me and my wife have been incredibly blessed. You know, that you talk about the importance of family. Now, I thank God every day that I was brought up in a loving Catholic family, you know, with a mum and dad who taught us what it is to love, and, you know, taught us what it is to serve one another. And I was blessed to meet a girl like Christiane who, you know, felt the same. And I don't know if I should. My family is a bit. It's weird because my brother married a girl called Caroline, who's from a Catholic family in Middlesbrough. And then my sister thought it right to start going out with Caroline's brother. And so we have a bizarre situation of we have double cousins where a brother and sister marries a brother and sister. Unfortunately, there wasn't another girl for me to marry in the family. So I had to branch out a little bit to find Christiane. But
did you say fortunately?
I'm blessed though, because me and Christiane share faith together. We share going to Lourdes together. And we're both Catholic teachers, and faith is a massive cornerstone of our marriage. And I think that, well, I thank my blessings every day that's what's happened to me, that we can support one another. But we're not like, we've got a priest friend in Middlesbrough, and I think he thinks we're like the Holy Family of Nazareth. Like, he's not here when we're rowing with each other or like calling each other behind the door. But I think being a Catholic couple isn't about being perfect, but it's about daily asking for forgiveness of one another and supporting one another. The reading at our wedding that Joanne was at, the first reading was from the book of Ecclesiastes that says, a cord of 3 strands is not easily broken, and the 3 strands are the couple, and the 3rd strand is God. And so, you know, marriage is difficult and challenging, and you have fallouts every day. Yeah. But Catholic marriage is a real blessing for me. You know, that we've been blessed with children, and we're blessed to have seen in my own parents and in Christiane's parents a real good model of what marriage is like. You know, sacrificing. Like there's no love without sacrifice, and I think Pope Francis really does sum that up, that, you know, the Christian life isn't always easy, but if you pick someone by your side who's going to walk with you and support you, you're halfway there. So I'm incredibly blessed in that regard.
I've got to say this, dude. I'm so happy. I've learned so much. I've genuinely gotten to understand two things that I'd never get to understand or see until I spoke to you today. I'm a huge fan of yours, and I said to Joanne that I was always intrigued because you deal and interact and teach religion to kids, and I think that's two very, very difficult topics.
Yeah.
Kids on their own.
Back to school tomorrow.
Oh my! Yeah. Kids on their own, they're a handful, and kids. We watched a show on Netflix. I can't think of the name, and just kids growing up in school can be an absolute
adolescents. Yeah, very difficult watch. But you know, I feel blessed to work in a school. I work in a school called Carmel College in Darlington, and it's deemed a world-class school. And it's an outstanding school as told by our school commissioner by Ofsted.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that in my school we haven't got challenges and difficulties. Children are the same wherever they are. But I feel a great privilege that I'm able to walk with the children along the path and help them to understand God's great love for them. And in a way, I feel that and Joanne will tell you from my childhood that from a very, very, very early age, I wanted to be a priest. I think maybe I was about 5. Joanne can correct me if I'm wrong. I think I was about 5 when I decided I wanted to be a priest. And I basically kept that thought in my head until I was 18.
It was going to be either a priest or Batman, right?
Yeah, that's right. Priest or Batman. But I think priest won. Maybe it was just dressing up and wearing the vestment. But I used to pretend as a child to have mass in the living room. And Joanna will remember that I shushed everybody as I was giving out the little chocolate buttons representing Holy Communion. And then at the age of 18, I was pretty much certain that I would go off and train to be a priest. And then Christiane came into my life. We met we'd known of each other for many years. Our parents are mutual friends of another family, and so our paths had crossed. But in that moment, and not to get too soppy, I knew that the Lord wasn't calling me to celibate priesthood. He was calling me to be married. And when I was at university, my dissertation was written on the topic of about removing celibacy from the church. And I got a very good mark for that at university. But when I submitted that same dissertation for a Catholic teaching certificate, it just passed because a lot of people didn't agree. And there's a priest, I won't say his name, but one of my friends spoke to this priest and said, "Have you read Andrew's dissertation?" And he said, "The problem with Andrew is he wants to have his cake and eat it." And Christiane said, "Does that make her the cake?" Now, that priest said that, like, what I'd written was, I basically said that there's no reason to have a celibate priesthood. Me and Christiane went to marriage preparation, and the priest is a lovely priest, Father Gerard, Monsignor Gerard, a good friend of mine, and we sat around his kitchen table and we talked about contraception and sexuality in a marriage. And I'm sitting with a celibate man of 55 years old with absolutely no experience.
I was just going to say the same thing.
And I just think that a married priest would be able to give such a different perspective. And, you know, I think one day, please God, the church will permit married men to the priesthood, as was the tradition of the church until about 500 years ago. You know, St. Peter was the disciples were married. You know, there's no reason for us to have a celibate priesthood. We have priests in other rites of the Catholic Church who are married. And I think that how can a priest, like a priest will say, "I'm so busy, you won't understand how busy I am, Andrew.
Oh my God.
I say this many masses." And then I say, "Well, I've changed this many nappies or diapers, as you'd call them. I've had to be up during the night with the little ones. I've had, you know, sort out the children, get them ready to go to school." I think a married person can give so much to the church. And in a way, I feel that maybe my influence is even greater. as being head of Catholic Life because I'm able to show authentic Catholicism without having a collar on. And I don't know whether sometimes the collar can be a barrier to people being just a normal human being. Well, I'm not that normal, but I know that my friend's sister died a couple of weeks ago, and he asked me if I would do the funeral service. And I did. I did a funeral at the Aquarium. And it was a Catholic funeral, but it was a service, and lay people are permitted to do it. But I wonder sometimes if lay people are able to connect more with other people because they're just like them.
I couldn't agree with you more, by the way. You don't have to be celibate to be special. These gentlemen, these priests that are celibate and they've taken the oath, they're brilliant. Don't get me wrong. That is a sacrifice, something most 90%, 95, 99% of people couldn't do. I take my hat off to them. But like you're saying, when you're going to a priest for marriage counseling and you take advice from a priest, you get brilliant advice about religion. But who better than somebody who's married, who's living the life, who's going through the daily trials and tribulations of marriage, of kids, of good days, bad days, to give you advice about, and you're still preaching the word of God. There are brilliant people out there that could do such a great job that are married, and you're limiting it to, here again, even with women being inculcated into the Catholic religion. I don't get what's wrong or what's stopping it from happening.
I don't know if it's the same in India, but if it wasn't for women, our parishes would fall to pieces.
Oh
Who
my
are the
God.
ones who organize church? It's women. It's the women. Who was the first person Jesus appeared to? Mary Magdalene. You know, women. I wouldn't be in agreement for female ordination because I think that Christ chose 12 disciples. I'm quite traditional in that respect, but I do think that women could have a far greater role in how the church is governed. You know, and like, I would say that I always ask the advice of Christiane because she's far wiser than me. And, you know, I think women with a maternal heart are far more merciful than blokes can be, men can be. So I think that I would love to see women more involved. I know that Pope Francis in the latest synod had more women involved than had ever been. And I think that's something that we just have to push forward with, is having a greater voice of women in the church. Because who's the greatest person who was not God is Mary. Mary is our model. And, you know, I know that some people say Catholics are against women. Well, the Queen of Heaven is a woman.
Absolutely.
A 12-year-old girl who lived in a poor family was chosen to be the mother of God. Like, you know, you can't love women more than that.
I couldn't agree with you more. I tell you what, I've been so grateful to have you on the show today. That's another topic that we want to talk about, the Catholic religion and moving forward, and kids and students and young people being somebody who has to do this day in and day out. Like I mentioned earlier, Catholic religion and being a teacher, especially when it comes to young people, adolescents, my God, it's a job that takes a special kind of person to do, and you're doing them both, Andrew. You've got a beautiful family. I'd be remiss if I did not mention, I've already mentioned your beautiful wife, Christiane, your beautiful daughters, Evangeline and Aurora. On a little bit larger spectrum, one of my favorite Catholic families, Philip and Helen Gardner, they're rock stars in my book. I've been there many times. I've had a great time. They're related to my wife. In Middlesbrough, we've had such lovely outings to your house, your sister, your brother. You guys are special. You guys are what it's all about, to be a good, loving Catholic family. Great training and upbringing from your parents. We were blessed. There's a lot of people here in India that are blessed to have families like that. You don't see that happening as often as you did back in the day. So thank you so much to enlightening us. We got to speak about Pope Francis, and I do pray. I will say a lot more prayers. Was it Cardinal Tagle?
Cardinal Tagles, who I hope the Holy Spirit chooses. I could tell you who I don't want it to be.
Would you say that? Would you actually say? Tell me.
Yeah, I would say I do not want it to be Cardinal Sarah. I think he's from Nigeria.
Okay.
And I do not want it to be Cardinal Raymond Burt from America. that they would be the two that I would say would take the church backwards. But I know that, and I have faith that the Holy Father is praying up with all the angels and saints in heaven, and he'll make sure the church will thrive. And you have to remember, the church is the people, and we have a voice too. And yeah, and that's the last word, really. We have to be a church of hope.
I couldn't agree with you more. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Merv Britto Show. I am so grateful to our guest today, the one and only Mr. Andrew Gardner. Joanne's clapping. She's got the golf clap going. Andrew, I couldn't thank you more. I can't wait to see you not only in the UK next month, but I want you to bring those lovely girls in your life to go.
I would love to. Maybe not when it's so hot.
No, now's not a good time. It's very, very hot, but it is mango season. I was talking about this earlier.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
You guys have got to come and visit us. I look forward to seeing. I'd love to take you around here. You'd really enjoy yourself. The show has been something that we wanted to talk about. Sadly, the fact that we spoke about Pope Francis after he's passed, he is going to continue to bless us all and say lots and lots of prayers that the next person to fill his shoes could be half as great, as welcoming, as legendary, as a person of the people, a person of the poor, and bring more people back to the Catholic religion. Andrew, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. God bless. See you soon.
I've got to get you back on, and we're going to talk about being a teacher and the youngsters that you have to teach in religion. I'm going to get Priyanka on the show at the same time, and we'll have a show about young people in religion, yes?
Yeah, that's great. I look forward to it.
You have a wonderful day. Take care. Thanks a million once again. See you, Andrew.
Bye.
I didn't expect that to go as long as it did. But I am so intrigued. I mean, he's a rock star, dude. He does this with kids. He does these tours to Lourdes and all these kind of things, and he teaches in these 35-odd schools. And it's mind-blowing because he's a young guy. He's so approachable. You can talk to him about anything. And he's not like a goody two-shoes. He's not like a Willy, yeah? He's not trying to be a Willy. Willy Wonka. He will laugh, he'll drink, he'll talk to you, but it's a good kind of conversation. It's a good, wholesome, clean conversation.
Absolutely. And he knows a lot about the Vatican, about the Catholic Church, about the history of the Catholic Church, which is amazing. Quite informative, that talk was.
We're going to miss Pope Francis. He was a rock star.
Definitely.
And if I could vote, I'd vote for Andrew to be the head of the church, because that's the kind of people you really, really want to make sure they focus on the right thing, which is the religion, the actual Catholic religion. But I hope he gets his wish, and we all get our wish, and we get somebody very similar along the lines of Pope Cardinal Tagle from the Philippines. Willie, any last words of wisdom or advice after listening to Andrew?
Yeah, I just hope the Goan people have a great insight into life of Pope Francis and follow the path.
Ajoy.
Yes, Merv.
What are your thoughts, dude?
I think there were a lot of interesting ideas that Andrew mentioned on the show, which I think we can take forward here in Goa. And I'm very, very glad that we got the opportunity to speak to him and get those insights.
It's from a different point of view, and it's refreshing because he's not some old fuddy-duddy. He's a youngster, and he's giving you so much good, interesting advice about the Catholic religion and where we want to take it if we want to continue and be prosperous and grow what Pope Francis wanted to do, which is grow this religion in the right way. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this. This is the Merv Britto Show. Go onto social media. We're going to be broadcasting this. It'll be up on the website, themervbrittoshow.com. You can listen to it on Apple Music, on Spotify, on YouTube, on Amazon. You can check us out on Facebook, on X, on Instagram. And like I said, we do this weekly. We'd love to hear from you. We will be back next week. And until then, take care, folks.